As I like to queue up, I'd love to get your thoughts on how fast the challenge is, how fast we need to respond. You'd have to live in a cave not to see what's transpired over the last month. In fact, the week leading up to the GCF in 2025, Dr. Neil, you saw the same thing. It was airports, airlines. Overnight, we saw the threat to AWS. We're trying to get to the bottom of what is happening here. And we're looking at projections of $23 trillion by 2027. So I wanted to get everybody's views on how do we deepen global collaboration with AI coming, then quantum coming, and why a center like this is so important. I talked about data as the new gold, right? The more we have, we're not going to be in response mode, but we can be proactive about the challenge. Mark, do you want to start there?
Well, okay, then I will take the cold start here in this case and take the government's position on that, because we, although typically everyone thinks we are the one that have all the information, well, welcome to reality. We are actually the one with the least, okay? So I'm looking this direction here, especially at the end of the aisle, and I think that is where information is, and I think that's very actionable information. And so to take a little bit the big arc here, right? You're absolutely right. Data is the new gold. We have a lot of information. We have a lot of metrics actually lying around there. We not only MasterCard. We all know Google has a lot of metrics. Actually, Uber has excellent metrics, right? So we have a lot of metrics. Maybe it's not that pertinent to cybersecurity in the first thought, right? But so the metrics are there, and you're absolutely right? They are obviously used for specific purposes, which make absolutely sense, and they are not yet used to connect the dots and to be exactly establish economic models that in the end help us to rationalize actually investments in cybersecurity, and also make a point that it's very important for us from the Swiss point of view, to also make the point that this is not just cost that you incur, right?
I'm glad you said that, because everybody looks at it's a cost, but they're not linking the benefits. Put it that way, Mark?
Yeah, it's actually exactly that way, right? So we understand it. The Swiss took very early on an approach when we talked about how should we actually on a national level, not on an organizational level, on a national level, how should we actually start dealing with cybersecurity? How do we actually understand cybersecurity? That's a function of what? Is a function of defense, as in military defense, right? Is it a classical security function, as in a policing function? Or what we decided to go along with, and actually that's what we do since over 10 years, is that we established, cybersecurity is a classical risk minimizing function if it comes to managing actually business risk. End of story, right? Is something that you put in place to get your business risk that growingly or increasingly gets digitalized for efficiency reason, to get that back down to an acceptable status of risk. So that's what it is. So it's an integral part of that, right? And as soon as it becomes that, it's not just a cost function, right? That is, you put there and you get risk down. If you get risk down in an efficient way with the right investments and the right capacity build up, right, it actually, depending on that, like you said, the benefit, it actually gains you maybe even a certain comparative advantage, right? Because it can be more efficient, it can be more easy, and so on and so on. So that is important for the point we try to do, like you said, because at the moment it's still handled as we spend money on cybersecurity, so that's 30% of our budget that goes into fixing something that shouldn't be fixed from the start, but we have to do it anyway, right? It's a little bit the wrong approach. And if we have economic models that also support and not only show the cost fraction, how much risk, how less risk do I get with the dollar invested, but actually how much of that investment also over the time, I think we heard it in one of the quotes, if we invest smartly, we'll have a GDP gain of 1.5%.
Yeah, that was Mohammed bin Salman, His Royal Highness. And it was an initiative that was originally driven from a threat itself. So they had the threat in the kingdom and in the wider region, and they wanted to turn it into a positive. We had a Central American country got hit very hard, lost 2.4% of GDP. So, Dr. Neil, why is having a center to create security as opposed to removing this cloud of insecurity that I talked about, particularly over the last month. It's now become the common language in my household. They see it on a day-to-day basis, quite frequently at least.
Yeah, thanks, John, and thank you for the invitation to GCF for inviting me. So you brought up the stat when we began of $10 trillion is expected global loss for 2025, and it's supposed to increase by 142%, I think, in 2 years to $23 trillion. And what John didn't tell you is that $10 trillion is actually the world's third largest economy, GDP, behind US and China. And I have to be remiss, and I think about if cybercrime is only reported 15% of the time. That's what FBI just reported. So what is the true global loss for cybercrime attributed to that? And so whether it's centers like this or some other initiative, you look here in Singapore, you look elsewhere, but even within my own team for Interpol's Cybercrime Directorate, we realize that we cannot go it alone. And everyone says that, everyone kind of says the same cliche things like cybercrime is borderless, and we can't go it alone. But I look to my right and to my left, and both entities, the cybersecurity agencies here, and obviously the private sector like MasterCard, very key players with us. I will say that just the GCF alone came through an invitation a few months ago for an invitation for their global initiative for capability building in cyberspace. And it aligns perfectly with something that I developed when I got there and my team is based in Singapore. We call it Project Symphony. But basically what we want to do is align law enforcement with cybersecurity agencies, because you look at the attack on a financial loss, and we've seen that with big companies in the past, like just few weeks, and it's huge. It's very destructive and very disruptive. But you attack a critical infrastructure and a water system, and I lived through, and I was in the US during Colonial Pipeline, the ransomware incident, and you see very quickly how it's not just like a financial loss, but it is very, very disruptive and almost chaotic, I think, in just a few days. And so it's something that I thought we need to bring those entities together. So I thought it was just a perfect opportunity to work with NCA and GCF if on that. But also it brings cybersecurity agencies, and even with my own team, we have MasterCard as a partnership, because we understand that law enforcement can only see what's basically in front of us. I mean, we're always putting out one fire and jumping directly to the next, just investigation to investigation or operation to operation. And it's the private sector who has this very wide view of those threats that are out there. And so we lean on them very heavily, and I'll talk about maybe if I get the opportunity, a few other initiatives that we have later, where we lean on the private sector to actually engage with our global law enforcement community to teach us.
Well, it's interesting. So Rigo, when you pick it up from there, what are we learning from the financial payment ecosystem that can help in this ability to collect data and actually sing from the same hymn sheet, if you will, internationally, as Dr. Neil's talking about?
Yeah, so as a private sector, we look at risk is kind of what we do in MasterCard. We help to manage risk. We help banks to manage risk. So we know that domain very well. And risk is a very difficult topic because it is a combination of the likelihood of something to happen times the altitude of the incident. Yeah? And that is two factors that you have to agree on how to standardize those. As MasterCard, and then the challenge with cybersecurity and then fraud in general is that the numbers that are mentioned are the direct impact numbers. It's just the numbers of the fraud caused by cybersecurity incidents. On top of that, there is ripple effects on other things. There's ripple effect on, for example, I'll take the example of Colonial Pipeline. There is ripple effects that if such an event happens on a company and oil is not available or fuel is not available, people's behavior of buying things changes. So we saw that in the states where this impact was happening, a rise of 70% in spending because people were hamstring. I don't know if English term, but at least it was collecting.
Hamstrung, we'd say in the past.
Our collectors are just changing their behavior. COVID was the same thing, to be honest. There was a lot of behavior. And that is what you have to also to say, what is the indirect consequence of this? Another consequence that we see of every cyber incident, and especially the public ones, is that we see people also losing trust in digital economies. And you also see that ripple effect is, oh, I don't trust can say payment instrument if you think in the traditional MasterCard way, but it can be, I trust in the confidence in the internet, I could trust in digital world, which is part of revolution. So we will create another schisma in the world, which is that you will people that have get digital on board and people that are not digital off board as well. Also, that is a consequence of cybercrime that we could see.
Yeah, very interesting. In fact, in our preparations for the annual meeting and even the GCF meets, when you go out to find the data on cybercrime, for example, you don't find a lot. You don't see global trends. You don't see like-for-like information. It's almost the whisper. We don't want to talk about it. So in that context, why is it important to take deeper dives and have like a center point, like the Center for Cyber Economics, really start to uncover what's taking place, but for the positive, not where you have to hide as a company? Rigo, do you want to address this? How does MasterCard deal with if there's a breach? Have you been lucky not to have a breach, but when it happens, try to hide and not report?
So I just say there, the practice out of a real-time world is if a corporate is hit by cybercrime, there's no way to hide it. Sooner or later, it will get public. And if you manage as a crisis and you try to hide it, it will play against you from a public affairs, public policy point of view. So don't do it, is kind of the big advice. So that's the reason why you have to be smart about communicating. Luckily, a lot of regulations require you to report it, and that's a good thing, and that gives a base of data, but I fully acknowledge that 50% of the cybercrime will probably not be published. We see the same on fraud, to be honest. So in that way, we really encourage that everyone shares the information, because it's only when we share information about cybercrime that we learn two things. Not only what is the real number and what is the real cost of society of cybercrime, but also what happened and can we help someone else to avoid that same problem, because it's become public and people can learn from each other. And that learning experience is probably the best accelerator of fighting cybercrime.
Good, Neil.
Yeah, so just to jump on that, so Rigo said don't do it, and I agree. So law enforcement perspective is just report. But I will say, since I've sat in this seat for the past year, companies have reached out to me and governments have reached out to me and said, we've had this breach or we've had this issue. And the first question that I always ask is, what law enforcement agency are you working with? And they're like, well, Interpol. And I'm like, yeah, but besides that, you have to work with local as well. And of course, there are reasons for not. I mean, if you're a business, it's reputational risk, things like that. But we on our team, we can't do anything except we want to go through the respective law enforcement agencies that are responsible. And to just touch on Rigo's point, we had a CISO from a very large and a very famous incident that happened, I think, maybe 2024 or early this year, I just can't remember. It was basically an AI incident or a social engineering where they were scammed out of $25 million. The person thought they were talking to like their C-suite and they ended up not. But the CISO had the courage to come out and speak, and he spoke at some of our events. And I asked him, I said, why do you do this? Because you don't get a lot of CISOs talking about, here's the things that we did wrong. And it was because he said, without me going and talking, other companies wouldn't learn. And so from our perspective, why I would want people to report is that victims won't be made whole without. And also the big one, and to touch on his, is we won't, as law enforcement, understand what the new emerging victim methodology or criminal methodologies is without you reporting. So it's huge. And so this type of place where we come together and start thinking about these things and maybe encouraging, reporting as a function is very, very important. But also, it's also a place, I think, for us, and it's something that we think about a lot. Interpol has 196 countries that we cover. It's a lot. And it's, you have Singapore, which is like gold standard for thinking about cybercrime and theft, scams and cybersecurity. And then you have countries that are just not there or close to it. And so what matches and needs for one country isn't for another. So what we will do is our stakeholders, our customers are the countries, law enforcement. So we will reach out to them through our threat assessments. Every year we will send out an assessment across the globe and say, what are you seeing? So that we know exactly how to tailor our support, how to tailor our operations specifically to help those countries in need.
Good. Just a quick follow-up before I bring Mark back in. We had His Excellency Macky Sall, the former president of Senegal, and he said this gap that we have, $30 per capita spent in the developed or the G7 economies at least, and $1, he said, John, that's even ambitious for Senegal. It's less than $1. And, cybercrime doesn't know boundaries, right? So how do you want these economies to develop, Neil, if they can't protect themselves? I mean, and should we start be thinking about that instead of lending money for hard infrastructure for the World Bank or the regional development banks, that this fits in the bucket as well? And you need, accurate data to do that, wouldn't you think?
Yeah, so I'll just say, I'll kind of stake in my lane. My lane is law enforcement. But I would always encourage governments to support law enforcement, to make sure that they prioritize that, especially cyber, because no matter what, and I have been at meetings, in regional meetings, where they've come to me afterwards, and we've talked about AI and quantum and things like that, because there are certain countries, of course, that are thinking about that. And they came to me afterwards, like, Neil, we're still worried about our people selling their IDs for like $50. I mean, that's where they are. So it's not like a wide spectrum. But I would say that combating cybercrime and focusing on that and making it a priority wherever, and especially a center like this where they can start thinking about this and bringing everybody up, I think is important, because no matter where in the world you are looking at or investigating or combating cybercrime, there is going to be victims affected across the globe.
Good. And Mark, you were nodding when I said this, and I'd love to have give your experience at the national level. How does a center with updated data and very unique reporting shape the national policy and also bring the private sector, as Rigo was saying, to the table as well? Is it difficult to bring the two to the table, and how does this help?
I think to be quite honest, I mean, I will also touch on the capacity issue before, but just to go into that question is, I think that really depends. So first of all, what I can tell you is it takes time, right? It takes trust, and it really depends also, obviously, the makeup of your country, the way, maybe even a maturity level if it comes to the let's say, initial trust that you have between the government and industry and whatever you did. So from a Swiss perspective, we started, just to give you an idea, we started 20 years ago to get private industry on the table, share with us on a voluntary basis, right? That's 20 or 21 years ago, actually, by now, right? Yes, we have, I would say, a very convenient, very trustworthy, very stable, and very robust ecosystem, that works, that can share. We can go. Second, we are small, 8 million people, huh? Pretty small country. Meaning, we still have that luxury that we actually call the CEO, if we have to, right? Because we most likely know him or her, right? So it still works. So that's what I mean. It really depends, yes? And that is how you actually then choose your means, how to get them. But it's still, you don't get around to get them on the table one way or the other. And so I think that is from the government's perspective. It depends a little bit how, but the why, that's very clear, again. Because we need that information. It's like exactly so, and that is exactly just to come back basically to the initial question of the whole economic model. Why do we need a center of cyber economics? Why do we need models to somehow underpin the arguments we all intuitively know that it's probably right? We all know it's probably right to exactly take that gap of 30-1. And try to, decrease that gap. Just for the simple reason, we are in an inherently global interdependent system here, right? That means weakest link, as it was mentioned, can be the best and most perfectly defended island on the planet. The wrong one goes down, you go down. End of story. That's just how it is, right? And we want to try to avoid that our too many attack surfaces that allow the wrong one to go down, so to speak. So it makes perfectly sense intuitively to actually invest there. But then we come again to the problem that we have, and I'm originally coming. I mean, you can read that in my CV. Originally, I'm coming from the intelligence service, and we always had exactly that issue, which we call it's kind of a adoption of the prevention paradox. We call it. As long as we do a good job, we are always faced with the question, why do we even pay you? Nothing is happening. As soon as it makes boom, we were always facing the question, why do we pay you? Something happened, right? And so I'm not new to that exact problem of, lacking good models to show actually it just happened once because it could have happened, I don't know, X, Y, Z times, right? So, just to close the circle into that matter. And that is why we need it. And we also need it because exactly the same thing in the, to also touch on that, in the field of cyber capacity building. If we, for example, we are pretty involved from a subject matter expert side, on our side, but on Switzerland as well, in capacity building efforts, right? Things like the global forum of cyber expertise and all this kind of thing. There is exactly the same thing. We have no problem to get the planners. We have no problem to get the implementers at the table. We have a problem to get actually the development agencies at the table because they always come to and say like, okay, I understand if we invest into that specific education of law enforcement course in that country, we can measure that because until now, average time for forensics investigation of a cybercrime case, 1 month. If we get it down to 2 weeks, because right tooling, right training, that's good, right? You can calculate that. If we invest in a program to build capacities on the strategic level on how to write strategies, how to develop national cyber strategies, critical infrastructure strategies, what's the return on investment? How do I measure that? But if I start, training cyber diplomats, how do I exactly measure impact? You understand?
Yeah, good. Let's bring Rigo back in. Thanks.
So the reason why MasterCard joined the Center of Cyber Economics is for a simple reason. We think that helping to get the data right is the foundational need for us to help society prosper. Point. That's for me the main thing, and I think we talked a lot about historical and so on. So, but that is we have data available on payments that can see what the ripple effects are on cyber. We have data available on a lot of other things. We are willing to share that and work on this to help quantify the risks related to the cyber threats there. On top of that, we also want to help to see how new technologies, how you calculate risk for new technologies, because AI and downstairs they talk about AI agent models, but rarely they talk about the cyber consequence of that. And that is another, and quantum the same thing, there are cyber consequences of it. Thinking from what is the cyber risk of that? What if criminals get hold of an agent AI model? What will change the economics on their side? Because they also work on a return on investment. How more active they will become is something to do, because that will drive your future investments as well. So we're not just talking about the here and now of a cost and a revenue, but we're also talking about the cost from the future of cybercrime that can be a different number. And the acceleration can be accelerating, not even building the models that today are predicting the 140% growth. So that's the reason why MasterCard says we need to be part of this game. We need to want to share information and help the Center of Cyber Economics to really have the best data available to make this analysis.
Good. We were talking about the developing countries and the developed, that gap. How does MasterCard work with SMEs? Because they're part of a value chain, right? If you're a major company and you export some of your work in the third-party space, how do you protect them?
So SMEs are the backbone of an economy, just in every single country. No matter where you are, developed, non-developed or less developed countries, doesn't make a difference. So MasterCard takes commitments on different markets. So last week, we announced that we will do an education of 10 million SMEs in Europe as part of a pledge that we say, here is a commitment of MasterCard to help SMEs to be cyber educated. We do these commitments in different parts of the world. We also are building tool sets at the very tool sets that we make available. We are partner of the Global Cyber Alliance. With them, we work on getting SME a tool set, a toolkit for free that they can launch and help cybersecurity. But it's also, toolkit is one thing. The other thing is making sure that every SME knows about it and you have to reach out of that. But that's what we also do. We promote the Global Cyber Alliance with a free toolkit for basic infrastructure to make SMEs safe, because they're so important for us.
Okay, I'm going to pause for a second here so you have any questions from the floor. We have 2 microphones, one on each side. If you can come closer. Any questions? Because one thing that just came out of the panel is that you would like to see analysis on AI and quantum. So we're not responding to the challenge, right? You say you want to know more as MasterCard. Any questions from the floor? Dr. Park, please. Can we move very quickly with the microphones? Is there a second question from the floor? If so, please raise your hand. We'll get you a microphone. Thanks, Dr. Park.
Yes, while I'm listening to thank you very much for the comments. One thing that we found is that for the child protection side, what we see is a precursor of what cyber risky behavior of children is about the infrastructure cybercrime. So for instance, like what we saw in this year, AI-generated CSAM just jumped 400% just within this year. And we do not see the major stream of child online behavior that reflect that. But what we see is a precursor of it. Is there a way that we can collaborate and then see that what's actually happening in the cybercrime level and how does it influence the children's online safety? I'd love to actually see that, whether if we can build a collaboration with your center.
Thanks, Neil. And go ahead, Rigo. You want to start?
So I'll just say, yeah, thanks, Dr. Park. I know Dr. Park very well. And so, yeah, it's done amazing work. So Interpol does have specifically a unit on crimes against children, and we look at sexploitation. We've seen similar instances with one of our regional threat assessments where we saw, I think, a 600% increase in sexploitation reporting in a year. So you do see this a lot. So yeah, looking at downstream precursors is something that we're also looking at. For us, we're also looking at the industrialization of cybercrime and what those things that are facilitating those equipment platforms, things like that, are facilitating cybercrime. So it's certainly something, yeah, definitely be happy to talk about.
Good. Rigo, do you want to weigh in on this? Because phishing was $1 trillion in 2024, right? It's pretty extraordinary, and the children are the most vulnerable. I have two daughters that are in their 20s, and they say they get hit quite often with just phishing attempts.
Yeah, so first of all, we see a few trends in cybercrime, and it's one of the trends which I find very disturbing is, okay, you have the sophisticated cybercrimes which are mostly financial and geopolitical oriented, but you have on the dark web, cybercrime tools become cheaper and cheaper. It's very easy to buy tools that hide your crime. And that's not a good trend. That opens the door for more of these situations. And that's the reason why I think we should move as a group of people with their heart and right place. From what we do today is we try to protect victims. And all our tools are protecting victims. I think we should step by step changing it and be more what I call disruptive to criminals. Make their business case harder, make their tools more expensive. With that, we will reduce cybercrime as well. Today, everyone is building the tool to not get hit, but we might have working with Interpol, we might go to tools that are better identifying who are the criminal groups behind this, and then give that data to Interpol to take the right actions, but have part of the investigation done. The end, we cannot arrest anyone, that's not our role, but then give these people to the law enforcement teams to then execute on it. And I think that's also the way we need to go, because at the end, the best way to fight cybercrime next to protecting yourself is to, and that's more for doing good for society, is be disruptive for criminals. And I think that's for me the way forward.
Are you a little bit worried, and this is the last point I'll have you share quickly because we have just 3 minutes, that we actually see spending on cybersecurity dropping? It's dropped 4% in the last few years alone, which I was a little bit surprised knowing the risks that we have today. And 2/3 of those polled, 66% of the organization expect to have AI the most significant impact on cybersecurity in the years to come. And 37% report having processes in place to defend themselves. Rigo?
But I saw this number as well, but I think 2025 will be a different number, because I see now a lot of increase in spending on cyber. Mostly oriented reasons, geopolitical uncertainty gives a rise in cybercrime. There's a lot of dialogue on nations to be more independent or more on the sovereignty topic, and also on the cyber front. And so there is so I see in Europe, in Latin America, in US, resilience has been the top topic, and resilience is also cyber resilience. And I see spending on cyber increasing, to be honest.
Good. Very quickly, Mark, and then we'll have Neil wrap us up.
Okay, well, I think go exactly along the same line. I mean, I think, but then again, we are back in the same problem, right? We have beautiful numbers, 4% dropping or 30 billion, I don't know, whatever damages and so on, and then we tag cyber on it, and it's all the same thing, right? But I mean, we have to look exactly at the spendings, where they go down and where actually they go up. And actually, if I look at the projections for the finance industry, they are not saving money. In the contrary, I mean, their projection goes high up, I think doubling in the next 10 years or something like that. So it's very important to have, again, the numbers and understand why, where do these 4% come from? Is that companies say like, okay, look, invested a lot into cyber because we saw, we digitalized everything out because of COVID, and now we had to put a lot of money in, and so this and next year we can, rest a little bit and take it back. So I think that is exactly one of the also the cases why you need good economic models and figures, because again, statistics. I was very good in statistics. I can fake you any statistic, or I can interpret you any statistic the way I want, right? But you can only do it as long until you have really sound, right, figures at the bottom. Then it starts getting very, very hard, right?
Very good. Thank you very much. You're the man to wrap us up, Dr. Neal.
Well, I'll just say a couple of things. So it's not all doom and gloom, I think. So I look at things obviously from a law enforcement perspective, not necessarily cybersecurity necessarily. I will say that we do these threat assessments every year, and what we're seeing is a big increase in prioritization of cyber crime units and things like that, even in regions where and historically have not. So you do see this prioritization of combating cybercrime. And then also, if I can just wrap up, it is that law enforcement are very big consumers of data. And we know this. It is mostly one-sided. You give us data and sometimes it's a black hole and you're like, where did this go? But I do want to tell you, because we have a lot of partnerships, including private sector organizations such as GCF and the WEF who are here, MasterCard and others. And all this information is very, very important to us. And what you see is an increase in efficiency and effectiveness over the years in our operations. And I would just say that it's primarily a lot of it, most of it goes to our countries because the buy-in and the work of the global law enforcement. But the other part is just the participation from the private sector and others who are providing this information really, for free, no cost to us, but it is very, very beneficial. And it helps us combat global cybercrime more effectively. So thanks.
Good. You were saying that the amount we have today is like the third largest economy in terms of damage. I was doing the calculations. We're looking at about 8 to 8.5% of total GDP lost in the cyber world today, which is pretty extraordinary if you would ask that question or shared that figure 10 years ago. Nice to see you, Mark. Thanks for participating. Dr. Neal, it's always good to have you. It's great to have MasterCard. Rigo is really good analysis. I wish we had more time to take questions, but the clock ran out on us. We are going to have a reception here. We have food and drinks in the back. I want to thank the GCF and our host country, Singapore, for bringing everybody together. You saw the work that's being done. If you would like to see the index that Dr. Park has, we'll put it back up on the board so you can take a very close look at the CPC. Can we give a nice round of applause to this panel? I know we want to take a picture, and we'll see you at the reception. Thank you.